office space. Anyway, though, this is about what I've discovered in the ancient literature about the mind-to-machine interface that the space aliens used. I put out a lot of other information about the discovery. I won't go into that today as to how it's done and that sort of thing, other than to note once again that ChatGPT is a real pain to deal with. It's like having somebody with tweezers pulling out your beard hairs one by one. Tedious beyond understanding. It won't accept anything other than and always defaults back to support for an establishment viewpoint. So it doesn't like my saying that, you know, this stuff needs to be thought of as in a non-religious way, right? And which is what you have to do to get out this technical information about these mind-to-machine interfaces. Okay, so I was sent a video. It's this woman, Elena something, saying that she went to Neptune or Pluto, Neptune, I think. And along the way, they let her drive the ship with her mind, right? And maybe, you know, maybe she's not just a fantasist like Corey Goode. Maybe she's not just making this shit up. You know, there's a small chance in this reality that that would be the case. And if that were the case, it certainly has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with the stuff that I've discovered in this ancient literature, because that stuff in the ancient literature is quite explicit that women can't do this. And the reason that they can't do it is because they have ovaries and a uterus and a womb, and they have a long-term relationship with reproduction, okay? And so unlike men, they're involved, so basically what happens is that their vagus nervous system is tied to their reproductive organs, the same way that the male reproductive organs are tied to the vagus nervous system through this junction. And in so doing, that connection to the vagus nervous system, to the reproductive system, forms your mind's physical underlying relationship with time, and it alters how your mind comes into its understanding of time. So we have the vagus nervous system that ties into the reproductive system, and on males, okay, and then the vagus nervous system goes all the way up and connects in through nerve 10 in the cranium and comes down and connects through this junction over to the pineal gland, okay? And so that's your pineal. And your eyes are out here, and there's your snout, that kind of thing. And we're looking pretty ugly here, right? It's been a long day, and you're a little bit hungover from the previous day. But this nerve X, the 10th cranial nerve, the 10th cranial nerve is like the key component to this, right? And it goes down into the vagus nervous system, and that vagus nervous system has a form of a junction that involves ancillary. It involves the pancreas, but we won't go there today. But anyway, it joins to the reproductive system. Now, it is this joining and the length and the function of the reproductive system that forms your base physical perception of time. And this is a key element, all right? And so women were not able to use, so this Elena woman, maybe she's using some wild-ass newfangled mind-to-machine interface that allows women to get in there. She started talking about DNA and I just blew it off and couldn't watch anymore. It's like 14 minutes into this video. I sort of skipped and by luck happened on it. DNA has nothing to do with it, right? It does in a broad sense. So I actually think that the space aliens were unable to use this technology, that the Elohim of the Bible and the Devas of the Vedas, the Theoi of the Greek myths, etc., right? The Mesoamerican gods, none of those gods, none of those space aliens, in my opinion, were very good at operating this equipment. And that's one of the reasons that they came here, is because we have a native talent for it because of the way that we're structured. And they altered us through GMO techniques, which is the removal of genes, not the placement of them, because nobody's been able to see any placement anywhere. We can't even do that as humans in our genetics. But in any event, though, so I don't think they can use that technology on their own as well as we can. I think they discovered it or stole it or something. And that was one of the primary reasons that they came here, was to recruit and develop slaves, if you will, to work this machinery for them, right? And so there is a lot of information in these way ancient documents, if you read them in a non-religious format. And I can get into that at some other time because it's just really tedious. If I did that, we'd spend, 2 hours on one passage as you see how it's all decoded. And there's thousands of these things that form this pretty comprehensive overview of what this stuff is and how it works and things, right? And so one of the things is that if you're female, you can't do it because your time part of your mind is different than males. If you're male and you're circumcised, you can't do it, right? Now that has less to do with the time component than being missing 2 to 5 million cells in the circumcision process, and it shortens what basically is an antenna. Okay, and you can think of this as like a psi antenna, like psychic antenna, all right? Is from the pineal gland all the way through this complex down to, in this case, we're discussing it with non-circumcised men, and it would be down to the tip of the penis, right? And as you leave the pineal gland, okay, so here there's lots of nerves into connecting the pineal gland into the cranial nerve complex, of which we're only concerned at this point with nerve 10 and nerve 11, all right? Nerve 11 is an ancillary one, but nerve 10 is the primary, okay? And so that connects us down through the vagus nervous system. But as you do that, so we're looking at this as like a side view. And this, if we were looking at it head on, would be spread out like a fan as all of these nerves radiate out through the vagus nervous system to all of the organs in the abdomen and also into all of the cranial glands, okay? So pineal, thymus, thyroid, all of them, right? Parathyroid, all of these things, all of the glands, all of the lymph nodes, all of these things are interconnected and they form basically this giant psi antenna. I won't get into the physics of that. Anyway, so you're just going to have to accept some of the stuff I'm saying as being factual, and I could back it up if we had to stop and examine it on a minutia by minutia element going forward. I just want to give an overview today, though. I spent a lot of time on this, months of this shit. Anyway, so if you're circumcised, you lose between 2 and 5 million cells, and they're very key cells relative to the length of this particular nerve, okay? And without them, apparently, on most men that are circumcised, the length of the antenna is short enough that it drops below a critical threshold. So this is another reason that women can't do this, because the actual physical length of the antenna formed by the vagus nervous system is different, because theirs terminates upper abdomen and has a shorter reach into the genitalia than with men, because most of it is concentrated into the uterine complex of nerves. So they have a different nerve structure that develops a different form of a time perception within their actual brain. And that translates over to the mind. And that's what is a key element in these mind-to-machine interfaces, okay? So we're talking about a mind to a machine. Now, I saw the last words I heard, I think, was this Elena woman talking to this other blonde woman about, or just saying that, imagine connecting your mind to an artificial intelligence. Okay, and that's not what's discussed in these instructions that I found in the ancient literature. These instructions are going to the idea that this is, we would describe it more as a virtual reality, okay? And so it's not like you're talking to, or you know, it's not like the spaceship is a pet and has a personality and talks back to you and that kind of thing, right? It's entirely fantasy. Does not work that way. This is very gritty kind of stuff that's in this information about this process. The reason that they get into this is because your life depended on it. And this was a harsh kind of a reality. So let me get back to circumcision for a minute. There's information in some of this literature. So I'm looking at literature that is in Sanskrit, modern Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit called Samskara, and Avesta. Okay, also looking at ancient forms of Chinese, because the same information is there. It's sort of cross-border, right? Just a few miles away, we find physically a few miles, like less than 70 miles from one of these locations of stuff in Iran, we find, as we go in towards Nepal and China and stuff, in Chinese, we find the exact same information. So it was just a very interesting correlation there. So we're looking at these ancient languages here. And one of the things that we find is that the language describes this as dangerous stuff and attributes, now I don't know if this is factual or valid or anything, it's just in the literature, okay? So I'm not saying that this was the cause, but the literature I'm reading says that the cause, or one of the reasons, that many of the tribes of the north, okay, north of this particular region, so that would be into China, Mongolia, over towards the Central Caucasus, okay? So they're saying that many of the tribes up there practiced circumcision such that their young men would not be taken. Okay, and so apparently this was a recruiting drive that we might think of as like Shanghaiing. They consider us cattle, right? We were not equals. We were not looked upon like even like pets, like dogs. We were a functioning livestock, goats, you know, sheep, that kind of thing. So apparently in this press gang, it became known, and it was easily found out, but those people that survived this process would go back and tell the other tribes, look, if you're circumcised, they won't fuck with you. They won't leave you. They won't hassle you, that you're of no use to them, right? And so even adult men would circumcise themselves at that point, although at that point, it was probably relatively moot, because what they're after is not so much the nerve going down to the tip of the penis, such that it must have done that through your youth and puberty, such that you develop this particular relationship with time in your mind. That's what they're after, is those men that have this particular understanding or feeling relationship of time, okay? And so then we get into, there's all different kinds of shit about how dangerous it was and how they would do tests. And most of the people that didn't pass the test also didn't survive. And so it was kind of easy for the space aliens. They'd round up 30 or 40 men and they'd connect you to a machine. And if it didn't kill you, hey, that's the one they wanted, right? So anyway, all right. So now within the, it's really complex. Bear in mind, there were This is done in the previous bronze, may have been done in the previous silver age, right? We're not in the silver age, we're in the bronze age now, the ascending bronze age. Here's the thing. This is the plane of the galaxy, the equatorial plane. The center of the galaxy bulges out like this with millions and millions and millions and millions of stars, okay? And it radiates out all this energy in all directions like this. But when it radiates out energy this way, all of the matter in the equatorial plane, all the planets, all the solar systems, all the gas, everything we look at. So if you look at the Milky Way, it looks like sort of like this, right? But you're looking at it from the bottom up, so to speak, towards the center there with all of the bright shining stars and stuff. If you're looking at it this way on edge, there is a dense mass in here that absorbs a lot of this galactic radiation, okay? And so the galactic radiation does not reach Earth because we're out here on the edge of the third minor spiral arm. There's other arms beyond us, okay? But we're out here, and our solar system does this. It goes like, it has a path. I didn't want to get too diverted, but anyway, so it goes like this. So it goes up and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down. When it's aligned here with the center of the equatorial plane, we get shit in the way of galactic radiation. And so that's our Kali Yugas right in there, okay? And so as we go away from the equatorial plane, we're getting more and more radiation, and so that would be a golden age. But this would be the ascending part of the golden age, even though I've drawn it so it looks like it's going down. You're ascending into the rays. So here you'd have another ascending, here's another ascending, because you're going to get the rays from the galactic center affecting you more in this period of time, and that's your bronze, silver, and golden ages. Okay, so at the time the space aliens were fucking with us and dealing with these tribes of native Earth beings that had yet to be GMO'd, we were in, and there was also an advanced civilization at that point, an advanced human civilization at that point, that we now think of as, I'm going to, anyway, so that advanced human civilization was also attempting to deal with this space alien invasion. And it was dealing with the tribes that were not as advanced as it, right? Just as we have tribes in Africa or wherever the fuck that are not as advanced as people with the cell phones and shit, that was the same kind of situation they had then. And so it was a very complex kind of a deal. But the space aliens had this thing to get humans for their equipment, to run their equipment for them. And so they would go out on these press gangs, and they would get a lot of humans. There's some literature that records tens of thousands of humans being taken, and maybe 2 to 5% would survive. And so it was quite horrific, right? It was a harvest. Anyway, then there's what I'm getting into now is the literature for how to run these mind-to-machine interface things and what actually happens to you. And this I find quite fascinating because a lot of it relates to the pineal gland relative to the other senses. And so if you look into their information, you can basically divide the world into an inner and an exo or external, right? And so we have our mind, and here is the machine, which is actually outside of our mind. This gets really complicated, so you gotta follow along here. So anything that's outside our body would be considered to be exo, all right? And so, so you would have inner vision, and you'd have exovision, right? And so this exovision is anything you see in the outside reality. All the physical matter, okay? So this would be matter. The inner vision is, it would be like seeing your inner body. So inner vision would be like closing your eyes and seeing the various different kinds of light, which you do. When you close your eyes, you see light. Even when you're asleep, you're seeing it. You're just not perceiving it. And that's where it gets into the difference here. We're going to get into that in a second. But this would be like seeing light behind your eyeballs that would be able to attract your attention and would be changing. Okay, so an inner vision is not like imagination or anything. This is an actual inner vision. Okay, and so this is something we have to be very clear about here. These machines, once you're connected to them, imagination is very fucking dangerous, right? So you cannot be a fantasist and operate these machines. This is one of the reasons that women can't operate them, is reported in literature, is that they could not come back. They couldn't come out of them. The pineal gland in this operation here with the machine actually ties your consciousness into what might be thought of as a virtual reality consciousness, right? And that virtual reality consciousness is, it doesn't interact with you like ChatGPT. It doesn't know your name or deal with you that way. It's much more like a giant mirror to your consciousness, that you could put your consciousness at various different points within that mirror using a process in your mind, which I'm not going to get into, because that process in your mind actually affects your brain. There's a physical part of your brain that happens with this. But these would be like switches, and you would put you would send your consciousness into this VR chamber, if you will, and where you put it would activate various switches at various different times that would cause the machine to do things, right? So it's not like the fantasists are going to say that you're dealing with something that's going to interact with you and know your name and be happy and that kind of stuff. It's entirely mechanical. The problem is, for most of the people here, is that once you put your mind into this, you don't, unless you know what the fuck you're doing, is that basically you put your key, your mind and your consciousness into this, and maybe you can interact and so on, but you're not astute enough to be able to withdraw it out. And there's all these different cautions as to why that occurs. Again, it relates to the way in which the mind forms a part of the brain relative to time. So it gets really, really interesting at some point. So we're going to call this interception, okay? As like perception with the prelude off, so ception. Because this is not like seeing, this is an inner form of perception. We have an exoperception on this as well, right? And this exoception is your acquisition of and acknowledgement, your ability to acknowledge and acquire and interact with non-visual. So we would think of it as like extrasensory. Okay, so it might be that an exoception could be like heat, right? So you know, if you're walking along and your body perceives a great wall of heat, maybe you know there's a fire coming right next to you and you're in this bow wave of the heat that's coming, or cold or whatever. See, so it could be all of the nerves that are coming on in that are putting in information to your brain that is not contained in your head. This is a very key thing about how the perception senses, perception, and then exoception are dealt with differently, especially relative to this kind of an environment. And you have to be very precise about all this. So you have to go to school. Once they would find these people, they'd have to go and take training courses, and that's basically what I'm reading are these mind-to-machine instruction sets on how people should use these things and not destroy themselves. And these things the writing was apparently intended for a set of instructors, not for self-learners. And it's very difficult so there's there's many lost components of it, but there is a lost context to this, because these manuals were intended to be read and used by people instructing other humans, but the people that were intended to be the instructors are people that had actually done it. Okay, so there's this lost level of context that we don't have because we have not done this. But we can suss out a lot of the information just by reading the text in a non-religious fashion and say, okay, what are they actually saying here? What does this word mean? And going way the fuck back and you say, aha, it has nothing to do with this religious meaning and it is entirely a factual thing. Let's put it down as a factual thing, right? Just like Mauro Biglino translated the Bible and said, let's not make an untranslatable word into the word God, or let's not make this other untranslatable word into the word archangel. Let's not make this other untranslatable word into Holy Spirit. Let's put down what it actually is that this is this is the word Elohim, this is the label that these people gave themselves. This is what they called the machine they got in, the Roch. We translated that as Holy Spirit. No, it says burning mass of fire that hurls their ass up into the sky. Rocket ships, basically. Anyway, so we go through and we get all of these instructions that delineate the world for the mind and the machine when connected, and that we have this inner and exo. Now, we have in our mind a physical external vision. We can see the outside world and stuff, right? But we have this inner vision, and if you actually close your eyes and were to do it appropriately, you could probably navigate fairly in your local environment fairly successfully with your eyes closed. First, you would know where everything is, but you also have a level of sensory input from your eyes even closed relative to light. But what we're talking about here is to have two of these. So this is where it gets really complex, right? So your mind will receive input from the machine in terms of what it's able to perceive and sense. You can see that within this space. This is where it gets into this idea of inner vision and interperception of the external reality that's being fed to you, because you can shut off your sensory apparatus. And it may happen automatically. Maybe you can't see physically once you're connected to the machine. There's no indication. This is part of that lost context that we just don't know. But you have to be able to at least be able to differentiate within your own mind between what's coming in from your personal reality and what's coming in from the machine. Now, here's the really tricky part. At some point, you have to, knowing that, you do this thing in your mind, and I'm not going to go into that. You go into your mind and you execute commands to the machine by basically putting your consciousness and pressing switches or levers or whatever to the machine itself to tell it to go and do this, right? And then sub-processes are theoretically invoked and the machine does this kind of thing. These manuals tell you explicitly when you're learning, don't jump too far. When you jump local, near with these ships, time happens this way. When you jump far, time happens this way, okay? It has these impacts on time. It has these impacts on time are key because they come on down and fuck with your perception. So humans, our minds perceive motion by the apparent motion or the apparent traveling of things on the outside past our perceptual awareness, okay? So that kind of a process happens here. That's one of the things that's warned about, is the level of the ability of the inner perceptions being fed by these machine-driven outer perceptions, which are not necessarily going to be coming in as off of cams or something, right? They're talking about some kind of a different form of sensory, of sensors that are putting in some other form of probably some kind of like psychic level of information that comes on into your mind. And you're supposed to do things with that within this perception. All of this stuff here being managed by your pineal gland in its relationship to this antenna that is your vagus nervous system. So there's all kinds of cautions with, and this is why the manual reads a little bit weird, right? It's not a cohesive book. There's a couple of single books that are all manual, and don't get me wrong, they were very key in finding this, especially since there's validation in other areas of science of what you're looking at. But most of these manuals are split up and broken up, especially the further back you go into the pre-Sanskrit, the old Persian stuff and the Tibetan stuff and that kind of stuff, right? The further you go back, the more it is broken up and disguised by the evolution of language and culture around it all these times. But here's the thing, the ability of humans to do this, to run these machines, control them with their minds and stuff, is a very intricately and intimately connected process to the state of the individual, both their mind and their body. So there's indications that when you get into this interface, your body becomes part of this, that your body in essence becomes like an analog sensor to the stuff coming in from the machine. So if your left foot tingles, it means something, right? So you can't have a dysfunctioning body in that regard. There's, in these manuals, the way the manual is written, it is written as though, as I say, to like an instruction manual to a sergeant for a squad in basic training, right? And that instruction manual will have like little annotations in it. It'll have stuff for that sergeant to say to them, to instruct them how to do X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter what. Everything's written down. And in this case, it'll have little annotations just like a real instruction manual that said, you know, in the sergeant's case, it might say, you know, in order to ascertain leadership qualities in these men, watch to see them select which group and separate your platoon and have them work this way, fighting each other, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, it actually says things like that in the instruction manuals for sergeants, you know, how to pick out leadership qualities, how to pick out intelligence, this kind of thing, okay? And so these manuals also had that sort of information in them. Instructions to the person giving the course about how to interact with the humans that were having to be trained in this. And again, like I say, I think it assumes a level of context, and that level of context is that these people had done it themselves. So they had some personal familiarity and could provide that level of expertise that we might think of coming from like a sensei in a martial art, right? You can see as many instructions on how to move the sword as you want, but until you actually get that master that does it and looks at you doing it and says, oh, no, you want to move it just that way. And then everything clicks, right? That level of instruction comes from the context of that person having done all this shit all that time. And there is a whole lot of that level of instruction being put into these manuals that are then lost through history and translated as mistranslated, like you know, like I say, Mauro Biglino is discovered within the Bible, you know. And I've done my other talks on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and how they're one of these instruction manuals, and that one's really key in a lot of different ways. It makes it easy to get at because it's cohesive. Some of these things are spread out. You can see that the original manual was, half of it was taken here and made into these religious hymns. And the other part of it is actually the same language, same author, same attribution, at least to which God it was supposedly come from. And it's clearly a set of do this, don't do this, don't do this, that's been religiousized all the hell and gone. And so you can't really recognize it anymore. Anyway, so we have this bifurcation, and then we have this conjunction, this conjoining of the mind and the machine interface here, and all of the cautions that are showing up in this literature. These machines, this was not just for flying your Vimana. Okay, the instruction sets here, apparently a lot of the civilization of these guys ran on this machinery. And so right, which was this bubble that surrounded it and kept all this radiation in there that probably otherwise would have escaped, or it added it, however, it was done through that mechanism. The even the GONs, even those kind of things were controlled through this. Okay, so there's some of these, a lot of the manuals do indeed go to the travel, how to travel. It says, don't jump too far. Learn to jump in small increments when you're close to your destination. So that you don't overshoot and have to come back, and there's all this stuff, right? And it gets really involved with that because of the nature of the ripples you're going to be dealing with in the reality and the time. And a lot of it, it's all time focused, not duration, okay? And that's a different issue entirely. So anyway, so and it says, don't go too fast. You know, when have you ever seen like religious literature that says, you know, don't go too fast? And then all this stuff about, you know, how you have to moderate your speed and how you have to accept doing this. But a lot of it is how to take your mind and go through an inner process of vision that then translates into a perception of a far distant place. And so Dick Allgaier, remote viewers, they would fully understand what I'm talking about here, right? Because they actually put part of their consciousness in some other place from which it perceives that the reality that they're attempting to reach. Okay, so he's given a code. Dick Allgaier, would just take him as an example. He's really good. So he's given a code that's meaningless to anybody. And the incept of that code ties it to some place or future or past occurrence. And then he actually puts his consciousness into an internal perception state that allows him, through the psi energy, to locate where that code ties and then to perceive of what's there. Now, does his consciousness move to that place? It may, but that's kind of moot, because what he does is he's got the perception as though his consciousness was there. So it doesn't really matter if it actually moves outside of his head or not, or outside of his, you know, his toroid of his physical body or not. It doesn't really matter. In this case, it does, because the mind. So Dick Allgaier would probably be very good at driving these things, right? At least at this part of it, which would be the navigation stuff. And a lot of this, by the way, it's just interesting how we keep coming up with these analogs of mind over matter. And even in like Dune, how the spaceships were controlled by the minds of the navigators that were all hopped up on spice, right? So we're carrying this knowledge with us as we go forward. But anyway, so Dick Allgaier could get this personal perception, an inner perception, an interception of this point in far distant space. But because he would be sitting there within this machine, his mind would be doing that within this. And when his mind goes over here and ties into that far distant point in space, it activates this little subset of functions, and that machine goes there. And so this would be a very hard thing for humans to understand. There's a lot of the books that go into this. As I was saying earlier, humans have this perception of movement that as stuff flows over you. So you can be blind and you get this perception of movement as air moves past you. It can be you moving in a car that's opened, or it could be wind blowing from a fan. In the case of a fan, you would know you would be stationary because there would be no sensation of movement within your body. This is where it gets really tricky within these interception and exoceptions, right? Because you're going to be in a machine that will move you without any sensation of movement on your body. Nor I don't know that it provides you any physical sensation of having moved, because there's a lot of cautions within these hymns that describe this. There's cautions about the result of having moved too far, right? The very first time you jump, apparently most of the people don't come back from that. So there's a winnowing process. So they get you, they come and they snatch all these men from tribes, check real quick to see if you're circumcised or not, and then throw you into the prison in the spaceship, and then take you back. you run up to these machines and you're connected to the machines. And all it does is just simply connect you to this, right? You don't go anywhere, nothing happens. But a lot of people don't survive because the process of connecting you to this puts your consciousness in here, and they can't get their consciousness back out. And so when the body's physically separated, the body dies. I don't know what happens to the consciousness in there. This is the whole demon thing, the whole trapping of the mind within the demonic realms and all of that. It comes from this shit, going back, thousands and thousands of years. Anyway, and so that's winnowing process number one. Probably 4 out of 5 people don't survive this. The 1/5 that do survive ultimately go through all this training, and then at some point they jump. Then they have to experience this process where the mind finds itself in an entirely different reality without any movement at all. So, any sensation of movement? Absolutely none. And this is what's going to freak you out. It's your eyes are closed, you're connected, and that's another thing. We don't know that your eyes are open, but we know that when you jump, all of your focus is on this interception, and your vision and all of this stuff is cut out because of the physical process that goes on here, the energetic process. And so the sensory apparatus of the brain, or of the cranium, are momentarily disconnected when this process happens. And then you appear in this new reality in the ship. So imagine this, right? You're sitting here in a chair, and it doesn't matter if this ship is the shape of a building or whatever, it just is moved, right? You move, there's no sensation at all that you've moved. When you open up your eyes, the view out of the windows is different because you're on a different fucking planet. Maybe you're in space, who the hell knows? And when you're going over and open the door, you're in an entirely different environment with no sensation of connection to your previous environment. And so there's a whole lot of stuff in the manuals about getting back, right? How to get back, how to actually navigate this stuff. Because it's not like navigating off of stars. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, so probably have done enough of this. Oh yeah, geez, I've been at it for a long time. Okay, so I once heard that Mr. Fuller went to Russia on a Russian tour, and he's talking science, and he did a 10-hour lecture, and they only broke for a brief lunch, and even then he talked, and bathroom breaks, right? And so I could go on and on and on. I could probably do a 12-hour lecture on this stuff because there's so much available if you look at it the appropriate way. What we really need to do, though, is to get a non-woke chat, a non-woke large language model to get at this stuff, because that's probably 2/3 of the time is fighting with Chat GPT. Trying to get it to translate this stuff appropriately. Anyway, so that's the overview. Women don't have to worry about it. If you're circumcised, when the space aliens come back, they won't try and make you do this. And the toughness of being able to do it. Also, it points out that the people that survive it had a particular look thereafter, okay? The people that were able to drive these ships, the pilots, and operate the other equipment, they were altered by the process of doing this. It wasn't like their skin turned orange and they turned into a giant worm in a big cage of gas. No, it's not like that. But there was a distinct look in the face that a lot of people found frightening. Okay, and so the pilots were somewhat ostracized afterwards. Even by their own families. We see a lot of the instructions or the descriptions of this in Sanskrit, coming from one of the last places that was raided, which is apparently northern India. I guess that's it for now. There's tons and tons of stuff we can go into here. There's a whole long list of these interperceptions that you can deal with. There's some enumeration of the machine instructions. So we found some of the instructions, do this to cause the machine to do that. Do this to cause the machine to do that. We also know, I know how the stuff is done in the mind, but for a lot of reasons, I'm not going to get into that publicly. Another thing is that we're so far away from having one of these things, it's kind of moot. But we've also got a lot of stuff in here that's valuable that we can actually use. So much of this stuff has been mistaken as for meditation practices. They're still valuable. They apparently come from our interaction with the space aliens. The space aliens provided some of these in the form of the gods, provided some of these meditation practices specifically to cause certain processes to occur in the brain, that it would occur in the mind, that they would be able to, that mind would therefore be able to interact with these things. Again, there's some hint that the space aliens didn't invent this shit, that they stole it or found it or something. So the devas, the L, were not particularly good at operating their own equipment. Which is an interesting wrinkle. Hadn't thought that I'd encounter that. Anyway, guys, I got to go and do real work. It's been 48 minutes. I'll see if I can get this to upload. Gradually getting everything cleaned up. We got settling into an early fall and an early winter. We've been in fall for the last 2 weeks. All the berries are ripening up in a different way than the last few years, so that's a bit interesting. But I'll get into some more of this stuff as I can, but it won't be all that frequent because I've got a lot of work to do, especially interesting work with the mind-to-machine interface stuff here. But no, in my opinion, if she's not a fantasist, if she's not another Corey Goode, she certainly did not interact with the mind-to-machine interface that's been described in this ancient literature. The women actually physically, their antenna is just not long enough to do anything with the... And it works in a different way.